was never the kind of man who expected much from family. Once the noise of childhood faded into the silence of adult lives, my wife Helen used to say, "Don't count love by holidays and calls. Count it by who shows up when the world gets quiet." She's been gone 6 years now. Since then, I've learned to live with a kind of calm that most people mistake for loneliness. I tend to my garden, feed the birds, read the paper with my coffee at sunrise, and for the most part I'm forgotten, except when someone needs something. That's been the rhythm with my daughter Lindsay. She and her husband Greg live 30 minutes away in the city. They come around just enough to say they care. Every other weekend maybe, always with smiles and sweet greetings. But underneath, there's an urgency. They check the medicine cabinet, peek at my kitchen, and ask if I've thought about long-term plans. Their visits feel less like love and more like inventory. But last Saturday changed everything. It was my granddaughter, Elsie, who said it. Just 7 years old, full of wonder and too much truth. She's always been different, softer, more observant. She was drawing quietly at the dining table while Lindsay and Greg talked in the kitchen. I was in the sunroom, pretending not to hear their voices carry down the hall. But Elsie, she heard every word. After they left, she tugged at my sleeve and whispered, "Grandpa, tonight my parents are going to call a lawyer. They want to take your house." I blinked. "What?" She looked nervous. "They said you're too forgetful, that they're gonna put you in a home and sell the house for money." I felt my heart stop and then start again, slower, heavier. "What else did you hear, sweetheart?" "They said they'd tell you it's for your safety, but Mommy said you won't need the money where you're going." That night I didn't eat, didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with the porch light on, my wedding ring spinning slowly in my palm. They think I'm slipping. They think I'm soft. They think I won't notice until it's too late. But what they forgot is that silence doesn't mean weakness. It means patience. And patience, when sharpened, becomes something very close to revenge. The next morning, I stood by the kitchen window with my coffee untouched, watching a squirrel dart along the fence like it had secrets to keep. My mind wasn't on the yard. It was on Lindsay's voice, soft and smug, ringing through Elsie's words. "They said you won't need the money where you're going." I'd worked 43 years in one company, started in the warehouse, retired as a logistics director. This house wasn't given to me. I earned it, brick by brick, through layoffs, late nights, and a stubborn back that never quite healed right. And now they wanted to snatch it away like I was luggage left on the curb. I didn't rage. Instead, I reached for an old address book from the cabinet drawer. Yellowed, soft-spined, the corners curled. I flipped through pages filled with names that time had thinned. Then I found it. Wayne Tucker, attorney at law. Wayne and I had known each other since our army days. He owed me a favor, a big one. Back in '79, I kept a secret that could have ended his career. He promised, if I ever needed help, he'd come running. It was time to collect. I dialed the number slowly. "Wayne Tucker," came the gruff voice on the other end. "Wayne, this is Jacob Mercer." A pause, then Jake. "Damn, I haven't heard that name in 20 years. I need a quiet consultation. You still do estate work?" He hesitated just a beat. "For you, I'll make time. My office, tomorrow, 9 a.m. Don't bring anyone." I nodded, wasn't planning to. After I hung up, I went about my day like nothing had happened, fed the birds, trimmed the hedges, smiled at my neighbor's grandkid on his skateboard. But inside, I was sharpening something far older than anger. See, the problem with Lindsay and Greg is that they think betrayal is a modern art. But I come from an era that mastered patience. We didn't explode. We dismantled. That evening, Lindsay called, overly cheerful. "Hi, Dad. Just checking in. How's the knee?" "Stiff," I replied. "Oh, well, Greg and I were thinking, maybe we stop by Tuesday and talk a bit about the future. We just want to make sure you're set up, you know." Sure, I said. Come on by. She didn't hear the steel hiding in my voice, but she would. Wayne's office hadn't changed since the 90s. Brown carpet, crooked blinds, and a dusty bookshelf lined with legal codes that probably hadn't been cracked open since dial-up internet. But it smelled like trust, old paper, black coffee, and a hint of tobacco that clung to the wood. Wayne stood when I entered. He looked older, heavier in the shoulders, but his handshake still had grit. "Jacob Mercer," he said with a dry smile. "You still breathing? Thought the world chewed you up and spit you into Arizona." "Not yet," I said, settling into the leather chair across from him. "But it's trying." He poured 2 cups of coffee. No sugar, no nonsense. Just like the old days. "Tell me what's going on," he said. So I told him about Lindsay, about Greg, about the conversation Elsie overheard, about the house, the estate, the subtle nudges and the fake concern layered over cold strategy. Wayne didn't interrupt, just nodded, brow furrowing deeper with every sentence. When I finished, he exhaled slowly. "You didn't exaggerate. That's a full-on maneuver. I want to make sure they can't touch the house," I said. "Not now, not ever." He leaned back. "All right. First, you need to check if your will and deed have any joint survivorship clauses with your daughter. Some people set it up that way years ago and forget." "I checked," I said. "No survivorship. Just me on the title. But Lindsay's been hinting about me adding her for convenience." He nodded grimly. "That's the bait. Once her name's on that deed, you're a signature away from losing everything." He pulled a yellow legal pad from his drawer. "We'll start by transferring your assets into a living trust. You'll remain trustee until you pass, and we'll name a successor, someone you trust." "Elsie," I said, without hesitation. Wayne blinked. "Your granddaughter. She's only 7. I'll create a tiered structure," I replied. "Her legal guardian can't touch a dime without court oversight, and the trust won't release the property until she's 25. By then she'll know what it means to protect something." Wayne smiled faintly. "You've been thinking. I've been surviving." He scribbled notes quickly, then looked up. "Jacob, once you do this, you're cutting Lindsay and Greg out entirely." "I'm not cutting them out," I said. "They handed me the scissors." He nodded. Before I left, he handed me a folder. "Take this home. Read it tonight. Tomorrow we'll file the paperwork." Outside, the cold bit through my jacket. But I didn't feel it. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting to be betrayed. I was preparing for it. Tuesday came with overcast skies and a bite in the wind. I had the heater running low and the living room clean, not because I cared what they thought, but because I knew the next few hours needed to look exactly like the calm before a storm. Lindsay and Greg pulled up around noon, right on time, as if punctuality somehow made their motives noble. "Dad," Lindsay called as she let herself in. "I brought you that turmeric tea you like." I nodded. "Appreciate it." Greg gave a quick wave. "How's the knee holding up, sir?" "Still mine," I said, and left it at that. They sat across from me on the couch like recruiters trying to sell a future I never asked for. Lindsay folded her hands on her lap, that fake warmth in her voice bubbling up. "Dad, we just want to talk about keeping you safe," she began. "From what?" I asked. She blinked. "From the burden of this house, the upkeep, the stairs. What if something happens and no one's here?" Greg jumped in. "There are really good communities now, not like before. There's one just 20 minutes out, with full-time care and a golf course." I sipped my tea. Never played golf. They laughed awkwardly. Then Lindsay pulled a small folder from her purse. Pale blue, crisp edges, obviously prepared. "We found this transition package. If you agree, they'll send someone over next week to evaluate your living needs. It'll also help us start handling the house paperwork." I raised a hand. "I'm not signing anything today," I said evenly. "Of course," Greg said quickly. "We're just opening the door." "No," I interrupted. "You're opening a door to take what isn't yours." Silence, just for a beat. Lindsay looked shocked. "Dad, we're just trying to help." No, you're trying to reposition the assets before I die. You think I don't notice the subtle questions, the surprise visits, the sudden concern for home maintenance. Her voice sharpened. You're being paranoid, and you're being careless, I replied. I stood slowly and walked over to the bookshelf. From it, I pulled a folder thicker than theirs and handed it to Greg. What's this? He asked. Wayne Tucker, my attorney. That's the updated trust paperwork. As of yesterday, this house is no longer part of any potential probate. It belongs to a protected living trust. Your names aren't in it. Lindsay's mouth fell open. Greg opened the folder and scanned. His face turned gray. You gave everything to Elsie. No, I said. I'm giving her a future. One you two nearly stole. They stood, flustered, throwing out a mix of justifications and weak apologies. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just walked them to the door, opened it, and said, next time you visit, bring cookies, not contracts. The house was quiet after they left. Too quiet. Sometimes silence brings peace. But that night, it rang with everything they didn't say out loud. How disappointed they were. How furious Lindsay must have been. Not just at me, but at the fact that I outmaneuvered them without raising my voice. The next morning, I heard small footsteps on the porch. It was Elsie, wearing a pink jacket, 2 sizes too big, and holding a notebook. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, but her eyes lit up when I opened the door. Mom said I could visit before school, she said quickly, before I could even ask. I stepped aside, and she walked in like she always belonged. Over breakfast, just toast and jam, she flipped open her notebook. Inside were sketches. Some were of birds, others of the garden. And then I saw one that stopped me cold. A pencil drawing of me, sitting in my chair, with a small heart above my head. You drew this, she nodded shyly. From memory, my throat tightened. I heard them yelling last night, she whispered. Mom was mad. She said you betrayed her. I shook my head. No, sweetie. I just protected what's mine. Are you mad at me for telling you? That hit harder than I expected. I knelt beside her chair. Elsie, you did something brave. You trusted your gut. That's not something to be ashamed of. It's something to be proud of. She looked relieved, but there was still something behind her eyes. That kind of ache you shouldn't see in a child. She said we might not come over anymore. She added, quieter. I paused. You'll always be welcome here, no matter what your parents decide. Her eyes welled up, but she blinked them away. Then she pulled out a crumpled sheet of construction paper from her bag. On it she had written, my family is grandpa, and birds and stories and jam. The rest is loud. I like quiet better. I couldn't speak for a moment. Instead, I folded the note, put it in my shirt pocket, and told her to finish her toast. After she left, I sat by the fireplace and stared into the embers. My bloodline was twisted on one side, entitled, manipulative, greedy. But here, in that little girl, was the spark they never saw, the heart they overlooked, and I'd protect it with every ounce of breath I had left. Greg showed up alone this time. 3 days after the confrontation, I heard the car door slam and looked through the window. He stood on the porch in a fitted jacket, one hand holding his phone, the other clutching a manila folder. He looked like he had something rehearsed. I opened the door, didn't invite him in, and let him do the talking. Look, he said, I'll keep this short. I think things got out of hand the other day. Emotions flared. Ma, I replied. Hard to tell emotions from ambition sometimes. He gave a practiced smile. We're all family here, Jacob. And families, they adjust. I'm not here to fight. No, I said, folding my arms. You're here to salvage what you think you lost. His smile faded a bit. Fine. Then consider this a proposal. He handed me the folder. Inside was a document, a suggested co-trustee agreement. It named Lindsay and myself as co-trustees for a new family-managed trust that would maximize estate value and efficiency. I didn't even blink. Wayne told me you might try this. Greg looked annoyed. So you've really decided to freeze us out? After everything we've done for you? I stared at him. What exactly have you done, Greg? Other than eat my food and measure the curtains. That hit home. He stiffened. You know, most men your age get grateful when someone takes an interest in their affairs. I'm not most men, I said calmly. And you're not family. You're an opportunist who married into this house, not into its soul. He finally dropped the mask. Fine, but don't expect Lindsay to come around anymore. You're pushing everyone away. No, I said, stepping back inside. I'm pruning the dead branches so the healthy ones can grow. Then I closed the door. Behind it my hands shook, not from fear, but from control. I could have yelled, could have exposed him publicly, but this was better, cleaner, legal. The next morning I met Wayne again. We added a clause to the trust. Any challenge to its validity would immediately forfeit all rights to any future inheritance, including sentimental items. Greg didn't know it yet, but by pushing harder, he just locked every door he hoped to sneak through. They'd expected me to fall quietly. Instead, I built fences, iron ones, and I was just getting started. There's a certain calm that comes when you stop pretending things will go back to the way they were. It's like laying down a heavy coat you didn't know you'd been wearing for years. The morning after I shut the door on Greg, I pulled out an old shoebox from the back of the closet. Inside were documents, letters, and a business card, so worn the ink had nearly faded. Elaine Foster, estate planner. She wasn't just any planner. Elaine had once been Lindsay's guidance counselor in high school, sharp as a tack and known for her no-nonsense way of putting troubled teens back on track. I remembered her well because years ago she helped Helen and me navigate our first trust setup when we thought we were dying younger. I didn't know if she still practiced, but I dialed the number anyway. Foster Financial came a familiar voice, a little older, a little deeper, but unmistakably hers. This is Jacob Mercer, I said. You helped my wife and I set up a trust in '98. I'm hoping you still do the kind of work that keeps snakes from slithering into bedrooms. There was a pause, then a short laugh. Jacob, I always liked you. Still sharp enough to know I'm being hunted. We scheduled a meeting for the next day. Elaine welcomed me with warm tea and sharper questions. After an hour of laying everything out, Elsie's warning, Lindsay's tactics, Greg's proposals, she looked over the papers Wayne had drawn up. This is good, she said, but you're missing one thing. What's that? A legacy clause. Something personal. Something that doesn't just move money but leaves a message. She slid over a draft. It was a letter, one that would be attached to the trust and read aloud if contested. It outlined everything. My love for Elsie, my disappointment in Lindsay, and the reasons behind my decision. If they try to fight this, Elaine said, the judge will hear your voice, and it won't just be legal, it'll be human. I felt something loosen in my chest. That's perfect. Before I left, Elaine looked at me closely. Are you ready for the fallout? If this gets public, they've already buried the relationship, I said. I'm just making sure they don't walk away with the headstone too. That evening, I wrote my final will by hand, at least the emotional version. I locked it in a fireproof box, right beside the legal one, and in the quiet that followed, I smiled. Because they'd come with plans and ambition. But I'd gathered something stronger, memory, truth, and allies that still believed in both. It was a rainy Thursday when she knocked on my door. A younger woman, mid-30s maybe, raincoat damp and eyes uncertain. I assumed she was from the utility company at first, or maybe a neighbor asking about the busted fence down the block. But then she said, Mr. Mercer, I'm Miss Keller, Elsie's teacher. I blinked. Is everything all right? She hesitated. I was hoping we could talk. Off the record. I stepped aside and offered her a seat by the fire. She didn't touch her tea, just held the cup and stared into the flickering light. "I probably shouldn't be here," she began. "But I've known Elsie for 2 years now. She's quiet, observant, not a kid who causes problems. But lately, I've noticed changes." "What kind of changes?" "She hesitates before speaking, always looks at the door like someone's listening. And this week, during writing time, she handed me something I wasn't prepared for." She pulled out a folded piece of construction paper. On it, in shaky pencil, Elsie had written, "If you say something true, you might lose your bed." I felt my stomach drop. "She said it was just a story," Miss Keller added, but her hands were shaking when she gave it to me. I leaned back, eyes fixed on the page. It wasn't just a sentence. It was a confession disguised as fiction. "I didn't want to overstep," she continued, "but I can tell she feels torn, like she's protecting someone she loves while fearing the people she lives with." "Lindsay," I muttered. Miss Keller nodded gently. "I can't make accusations, but I've seen enough over the years to know when a child's carrying too much weight." My jaw tightened. "Thank you for telling me. I'll handle it." She stood to leave but paused at the door. "Whatever's going on, she clearly trusts you. That's rare. Don't let her down." As the door shut behind her, I stared at the letter for a long while. That sentence, "If you say something true, you might lose your bed," haunted me more than anything Greg or Lindsay had done to me directly. Because now their betrayal wasn't just selfish. It was abusive. I pulled out my legal folder and wrote a new clause if anything ever happened to me unexpectedly. Full custody of Elsie, pending investigation, would be petitioned to my nephew Darren, a family man with integrity who lived 2 towns over. He had no idea yet, but I trusted him more than my own daughter, because Elsie deserved better. And this time, I wasn't just defending my legacy, I was defending hers. For the next 2 weeks, I kept my world quiet, but my mind busy. I changed the locks, backed up every document, and installed a discreet security system my neighbor's son helped me with. Not the flashy kind. Just enough to track visitors and keep footage if someone decided to snoop while I was at the grocery store. I even started keeping a small journal, not for posterity, but for evidence. Who visited, what they said, what they didn't say. Greg stopped calling entirely. Lindsay texted once, a one-liner, "Hope you're doing okay." I didn't reply, but the tension returned sooner than I expected. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I received a notice from the county clerk's office. Someone had submitted a request to inquire about a power of attorney transfer on my behalf. Only one person had the motive, and the arrogance. Wayne confirmed it minutes later. "Looks like someone's trying to pull an early competency filing," he said. "It's not official yet, but if they get a doctor to declare you impaired, they can push for guardianship in court. That fast?" I asked. "Faster than you'd think if you sign something under pressure, or if they forge your consent." The realization hit like cold wind through a broken window. They were speeding up the plan. I wasn't just being sidelined, I was being erased. But they'd forgotten something vital. I was already 2 steps ahead. I asked Wayne to notarize an advanced medical directive, stating that no decisions could be made on my behalf without 2 independent evaluations from non-family practitioners. We filed it that afternoon. Then I called Elaine and added another clause to the trust. If anyone initiated guardianship proceedings, their inheritance rights would be voided permanently. The sword was drawn. All that remained was for someone to step into it. That night I sat on the porch, the cold seeping into my sleeves, watching the streetlights flicker to life. Elsie's teacher was right. The girl was too smart for the house she lived in. I made one final call before going in to Darren, my nephew. "Hey, Uncle Jake," he answered. "Everything okay?" "No," I said gently, "but it will be. I'm sending over something. I need you to read it, and I need to know, if the time comes, are you willing to fight for a little girl's peace of mind?" He didn't hesitate. "For Elsie, always." As I hung up, the wind picked up, knocking the old wind chime against the siding. The clock had started ticking, but this time I controlled the hourglass. Lindsay didn't knock. She let herself in just like she used to when she was a teenager coming home past curfew, bold, loud, and ready to lie. I was in the kitchen making tea. The kettle hissed behind me when she walked in. "Dad," she snapped, "we need to talk." I didn't turn right away. Let the silence hang for a moment. "About what?" I asked, finally facing her. She dropped her purse on the counter like it was a gavel. "About all this nonsense. The lawyer calls, the trust, the will. Elsie's teacher saying you're preparing for custody changes. What the hell are you doing?" "Protecting what matters," I said calmly. "By cutting out your own daughter." Her voice cracked now, not from sadness but from panic. "You're making legal decisions based on a 7-year-old's scribbles." "No," I said, locking eyes with her. "I'm making decisions based on patterns. Ones you've repeated since you married Greg. You don't visit out of love. You visit to check value." "That's not true." "Then why did you file for power of attorney behind my back?" She flinched. "I got the notice." I continued. "Did you think I'd just roll over? Sign whatever you placed in front of me because my hands tremble when it's cold?" "I was trying to protect you," she said, but her voice had no conviction. "No, you were trying to own me before I was gone." Her face tightened. "So this is it. I'm nothing to you." I set down my tea. "You're my daughter. I'll never stop wishing you had turned out different. But love doesn't mean surrender." I handed her a sealed envelope. She opened it. Inside, a copy of the trust, the amendment disqualifying anyone who contests it, the medical directive, a notarized affidavit of my mental competence, dated 2 weeks ago, signed by 2 independent physicians. Her hands shook now. "For real? This is war," she whispered. "No," I said. "War is messy. This is paperwork." She stared at me as if waiting for me to soften, but I was long past that. "I don't want to see you go to court," I added. "I don't want this to get uglier than it already is. But if you force me, I'll take you apart one clause at a time." The room felt frozen. Finally, she gathered her things and walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned. "You're choosing a child over your own blood." "No," I said quietly. "I'm choosing someone who still remembers what family means." She left, and I exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. Later that evening, I watched Elsie draw by the fire. Her cheeks flushed, her focus intense. She didn't know what had just happened. Not yet, but she'd feel it. In the safety, in the peace, in the silence where fear used to live. And that was enough. 3 days passed without a word from Lindsay or Greg. The air felt different in the house. Lighter, as if something toxic had finally been bled out of the walls. Elsie came by that weekend, her little pink backpack bouncing as she ran up the steps. No one drove her. She'd walked with a neighbor's teen who lived 2 houses down, said her mom was busy. I didn't ask more. We spent the morning baking banana bread, her favorite. She cracked eggs like a pro and scolded me for using too much cinnamon. At one point she wiped flour on my nose and giggled so hard she snorted. That sound, it felt like healing. After lunch we sat on the floor by the fireplace, her notebook spread out, filled with doodles and short stories in her clumsy looping handwriting. "Do you think stories can change things?" she asked suddenly. "Always," I said. "Sometimes stories do more than rules ever can." She smiled, then returned to her page, scribbling faster. That night, after she left, I pulled out the second envelope Wayne had prepared, the one no one knew about yet. Inside was a letter, notarized and sealed, a private document. It detailed a gift I'd arranged, a small property outside town in trust for Elsie. Not a mansion, just a quiet little cottage with enough space for a garden, a library nook, and fresh air. The kind of place she could escape to when life got too loud. The trust wouldn't activate until she turned 25, or sooner if her guardianship changed before then. It came with conditions: no sale before age 30 and no co-ownership. It was hers alone, because she needed to know that someone somewhere believed in her enough to prepare a future she didn't yet realize she'd need. That night, I packed the envelope in my safe, behind old medals, tax returns, and a photograph of Helen holding baby Lindsay in the hospital. Funny how time folds in on itself. I'd once protected Lindsay from the cold world. Now I was protecting her daughter from the cold inside her own home. Legacy, it seems, doesn't always run in blood. Sometimes it skips generations and finds its way to the ones who still believe in kindness. I added one last note to the letter: this home is your shelter when you grow tired of noise. I hope by then you've learned to be your own peace. I've come to believe that peace isn't a reward for the righteous. It's a choice. One you make again and again, even when it feels like the world is daring you to stay angry. It's been a month since Lindsay walked out that door. She hasn't called. Greg hasn't shown his smug face. Not even a card, not even a lie to soften the silence. But Elsie comes by every Saturday, rain or shine. Sometimes with a new story, sometimes with a question I can't quite answer, and sometimes just to sit with me on the porch and say nothing at all. She doesn't know about the house waiting for her, or the journals I've written to her, one for each birthday until she's 25. I'll leave those with Wayne when the time comes, but she knows this house is her safe place. Last Sunday she asked, "Grandpa, our family's supposed to be forever?" I looked at her long and hard. The ones that matter are, the others we let go of, so the good ones can grow stronger. She nodded, like she understood more than her age allowed. And I felt it in that moment, not relief, not triumph, but a quiet kind of closure. The kind that only comes when you've fought the battle, not with fists or fury, but with clarity. I still keep Helen's photo on the mantle. Some nights I talk to it. I imagine her smiling at the way I handled things, without drama, without shouting, just paperwork and patience. The garden out back has started to bloom again. Early spring buds pushing through frost-bitten soil, kind of like Elsie, really, soft, persistent, and determined to grow where no one expected it. Lindsay might never forgive me. That's fine. Greg might try something again. He'll fail. Because everything they once assumed was theirs is now sealed tighter than a vault, guarded not by pride, but by a promise. And when the day comes that I'm no longer in this house, the wind will still move through these halls. The birds will still gather outside the kitchen window. And Elsie, God willing, will walk through the front door and know that this was always meant for her. Not because of inheritance, but because of intention. In the end, they tried to erase me, but I rewrote the story, and this time it ends with peace. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Comment below and let us know which city you're watching from. Your support helps keep these stories alive.